My stepmom treated me like a servant for 14 years in my own house, but when she charged me $1,000 rent, I found the deed my grandparents hid and kicked them all out without mercy. I'm 22 years old. I work at Starbucks and I'm taking online classes. And what happened a few months ago literally changed my life completely. Like, from living as a servant in my own house to being the owner of everything and kicking my stepmother and her kids out onto the street. I know it sounds crazy, but let me tell you the whole story from the beginning because it's totally insane. My mom died when I was 8 years old, breast cancer, and honestly, I don't remember much from that time beyond feeling confused and sad all the time. My dad, who was like 32 then, basically fell apart. You know, he didn't know how to deal with having a young daughter and working full-time and doing everything my mom used to do. So, my maternal grandparents, who obviously adored my mom, moved in with us to help raise me. And since our house back then was small, they bought a bigger house in a really nice neighborhood near Boston. 4 bedrooms, backyard, the whole thing. We all lived there together, and honestly, it was nice. My grandparents took care of me, took me to school, cooked, and my dad could work without stressing so much. I was happy. I mean, I missed my mom every day, but at least I had my grandparents who loved me and made me feel safe. Everything started to change when I was like 10. My dad met Stephanie at a business conference, 2 years after my mom died, and literally within 6 months they were married. 6 months. Can you believe it? My grandparents were like, "Wait a minute, are you sure?" But my dad was like in love or whatever and wasn't listening to anyone. Stephanie was 31 at the time, all smiles and kindness when my dad was around, but when he wasn't there, she was different, like colder. She came with 2 kids, Ryan, who was 13, and Kayla, who was 9, so like, almost my age. At first, I thought I was finally going to have siblings and everything was going to be great. But no, it definitely wasn't like that. They moved into our house. Well, technically, my grandparents' house that they had bought, and at first everything seemed normal. But Stephanie started taking control of everything little by little. You know, reorganizing the kitchen, changing decorations, making the house more hers. And she started assigning me chores. At first, small things like, "Zoe, can you wash the dishes? Zoe, can you take out the trash?" But gradually it became, "Zoe, do all the house cleaning. Zoe, cook dinner. Zoe, wash everyone's laundry." And when I say everyone, it included Ryan and Kayla's clothes, who literally didn't lift a finger. Ryan spent all day playing video games, saying he was going to be a famous content creator someday, and Kayla was obsessed with Instagram and TikTok, taking pictures of herself all the time. Neither of them worked or helped with anything. My grandparents saw all this and didn't like it at all. They'd tell my dad, but he was always like, "You're exaggerating. Stephanie is just trying to keep the house organized. Zoe needs to learn responsibility." Like she had completely blinded him or something. My grandparents died in 2019, first my grandfather from a heart attack, and then my grandmother like 6 months later. I think she literally died of sadness. I was 15 and it was devastating. They were the only people who really defended me and made me feel loved in that house. After they died, things got much worse, because there was no one left who could control Stephanie or make her feel ashamed of how she treated me. What I didn't know, and this is the important part, is that before they died, my grandparents had put the house deed in my name. The entire house. Legally mine. But they never told me. I guess because I was too young and they wanted my dad to tell me when the time was right or something. The problem is my dad didn't know either. I mean, my grandparents handled everything with their lawyer and never mentioned anything to anyone. So, for years, literal years, I lived in my own house without knowing it while being treated like the family servant. I spent all of high school working at Starbucks part-time, studying, and doing absolutely all the household chores. I cooked breakfast, packed lunches, cleaned bathrooms, washed clothes, took out trash, mowed the lawn, everything. Meanwhile, Ryan, who was already like 23 years old, was still unemployed, playing video games all day. And Kayla went to community college but basically spent all her time at parties and posting stories on Instagram. Stephanie spent her time having coffee with her friends and going to the gym, acting like she was the queen of the house. My dad worked all the time, and when he got home, Stephanie transformed into the perfect wife. So he thought everything was fine and that I was just a dramatic teenager when I complained. When I turned 18 and graduated high school, Stephanie started pushing for me to move out. Like, "You're an adult now. You should go to college in another state, get your own place, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't have money for that. I'd been saving from my job, but it wasn't enough. And besides, I was taking online classes at community college because it was cheaper. I told her I needed to stay until I could save more, and she made this face like I'd ruined her life. My dad said it was fine for me to stay as long as I was studying, which made Stephanie be in a bad mood for weeks. Fast forward to like 6 months ago. I was 21, almost 22, still working at Starbucks, taking online classes, saving what I could. One night at dinner, totally out of nowhere, Stephanie announces that I'd been too comfortable living for free and it was time for me to start contributing financially. She said I needed to pay $800 a month rent plus my share of utilities, which would be another $200 approximately. $1,000 a month, while still doing all the household chores, while Ryan and Kayla paid nothing and didn't lift a finger. I just sat there like, seriously? You're charging me rent in? Is my grandparents' house? But I didn't say anything at that moment, because I was processing the audacity. My dad was like, well, Stephanie has a point. You're an adult now. But I was so angry I got up from the table and went to my room. That night, I was up thinking about the whole situation and decided to go through the papers my grandparents had left me in a box that had been stored in my closet since they died. I'd never gone through everything because it was too painful, but that night I searched through it all and found a big envelope with legal documents. And there it was, the house deed, in the name of Zoe Mitchell, meaning me, dated 2018, a year before they died. There was a letter from my grandmother explaining that they wanted the house to be mine, so I would always have a home no matter what happened, that it was their way of taking care of me even after they were gone. I literally started crying sitting there on my bedroom floor at 2 inches the morning reading this. The next day, I went to a lawyer. Well, first I Googled free or low-cost lawyers and found a legal clinic that helped me. I showed them the documents and they confirmed that yes, the house was legally mine, the deed was valid, and technically my dad and his whole new family had been living in my house all this time without paying rent. The lawyer told me I had every right to charge them rent or even ask them to leave if I wanted. I left that office feeling like I had superpowers or something. I waited until the next family dinner to drop the bomb. Stephanie was talking again about the rent I was supposedly supposed to start paying her, telling me she needed the first payment by the end of the month, and Ryan was there like, yeah, Zoe, we all have to contribute, said the guy who hadn't worked a day in his life, and I simply said, okay, sounds fair. So you guys are going to start paying me rent too, right? Stephanie looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I pulled out the copy of the deed I'd brought and put it on the table. I said, this house is legally mine. My grandparents left it to me before they died. So technically you've been living in my house for free for years. The silence was incredible. My dad grabbed the papers and started reading them, his face going from confusion to shock. Stephanie turned pale and then red, like I could see the rage building up. Ryan said something like, this has to be fake. And Kayla was recording everything on her phone, of course. My dad finally said, this is real. These documents are real. And he looked like someone had punched him. Stephanie exploded, started screaming that it was impossible, that my grandparents would never do that without telling my dad, that I'd probably forged the documents. All kinds of crazy accusations. I told her she could verify it with the property records if she wanted, that everything was completely legal. The thing is, after that dinner, Stephanie changed tactics. Instead of continuing to yell, she started trying to manipulate my dad into forcing me to leave. I heard her one night talking to him in their room, saying things like, she's too young to handle a property like this. We should convince her to sell the house and use the money for her education. She could go to a real university in another state. It would be better for her to be far away and start over. My dad sounded uncertain, but she kept pushing, and I realized they were going to try to get me out of my own house. So I started recording. I bought one of those small recorders on Amazon and left it in strategic places. I recorded Stephanie telling my dad to find a way to invalidate the deed, to talk to a lawyer to see if they could claim I was a minor when they left it to me, and that's why it wasn't valid. Stuff like that. I recorded Ryan and Kayla talking about how it was unfair that the house was mine when they'd also lived there, as if having to live with me gave them any rights. I saved everything. A week later, I organized another family meeting. I put all the cards on the table, literally. I said, look, this is my house, and if you're going to stay here, you're going to pay rent. $1,200 per person, per month, Non-negotiable. Stephanie almost fell out of her chair, screamed that it was robbery, that I was crazy, that she was never going to pay that. I told her, perfect. Then you have 30 days to move out. My dad tried to mediate. Like, Zoe, let's be reasonable. And I told him, I've been reasonable for years while being treated like a servant in my own house. Not anymore. Stephanie threatened me, literally told me I was going to regret it, that she was going to make my life impossible. Ryan said he was going to sue me, which was funny because he didn't even have money for a lawyer. Kayla started posting vague things on her social media about toxic family and being kicked out of your house, even though technically it wasn't her house to begin with. The situation got super tense. Nobody talked to me except to yell or insult. I went back to my lawyer and we started the official eviction process. I hired a real lawyer this time using my savings because I realized this was going to get ugly and I needed to do everything correctly and legally. I served formal eviction papers to Stephanie, Ryan, and Kayla, giving them 60 days to vacate the property. My dad didn't get papers because technically I told him he could stay if he wanted, that he was my dad and I wasn't going to kick him out, but that he had to choose between supporting his wife or supporting me. Things escalated quickly. Stephanie tried to steal my mom's jewelry that I kept in my room, things my grandparents had given me that belonged to my mom. Luckily for me, I'd installed security cameras in my room after all this started, because I didn't trust any of them anymore. I recorded her coming into my room when I was at work, opening my dresser, taking out the jewelry box. I confronted her that night with the video, and she said she was just moving them to a safer place, that I was irresponsible and would probably lose them. I told her either return the jewelry immediately or I'd call the police. She returned them but kind of threw them at me, and I saw in her eyes that she completely hated me. I called the police anyway and filed a report about the attempted theft. The officer who came was super professional, watched the camera footage, took my statement and Stephanie's, who of course cried and said it was all a misunderstanding, that she considered that jewelry as family inheritance and just wanted to protect it. The officer told her that regardless of her intentions, entering someone's room and taking their belongings without permission was technically theft, and that if I decided to press charges, she could face legal problems. I didn't press charges, because frankly, I just wanted her out of my house once and for all. A moving day was dramatic telenovela level. I hired a moving company? Yes. I paid to have all of Stephanie, Ryan, and Kayla's stuff packed and moved because I wanted them out as fast as possible and without excuses that they had no way to move their things. Stephanie made a whole scene, crying and saying how could I do this to my dad, that he had sacrificed so much for me, that I was a horrible and ungrateful person. I told her my dad could stay if he wanted, that he was welcome, but that she and her kids weren't. My dad finally said he was leaving with Stephanie, that he couldn't abandon his wife. And honestly, I felt relief more than sadness at that moment. There was a sheriff's deputy supervising the whole move to make sure everything was peaceful, because my lawyer had recommended having police presence given how things had gotten. Ryan was going around the house taking things that weren't his, like a PlayStation that I had bought with my money, and I had to tell the deputy that didn't belong to him. Kayla was recording everything for her, social media, crying on camera about how her evil stepsister was kicking them out onto the street, which was so ridiculous I almost laughed. I wasn't kicking them onto the street. I'd given them 2 months to find another place. More than enough time. Stephanie gave this dramatic speech before leaving, like standing in the doorway with tears running down her face, saying that someday I was going to understand what it feels like to be betrayed by family, that karma was going to come for me, the whole thing. The movers had already packed everything and were loading the truck, and she was still standing there talking. Finally, the deputy told her it was time to go, and she walked out like a runway model with my dad following her like a puppy. Ryan left angry, threw the house keys in the grass instead of giving them to me. Very mature. Kayla gave me a look that I guess was supposed to make me feel bad and left. And just like that, they were gone. The crazy thing is, afterwards I found out, from a distant cousin who has contact with them, that Stephanie and my dad are living in Stephanie's sister's apartment, a tiny place with 2 rooms where they're sharing space with the sister, her husband, and their 2 kids. Ryan is working at GameStop now, which is ironic considering he spent all his time playing video games, and now he has to sell them. Kayla is living between different friends' houses and the crowded apartment. Her Instagram account much less glamorous now that she doesn't have the nice house as a backdrop for her photos. My dad has sent me messages a couple of times. At first they were angry, telling me I'd destroyed our family, that my grandparents would be disappointed in me, trying to make me feel guilty. But then the messages changed, became more like, "Can we talk? I miss my house. I think I made mistakes. I haven't responded yet." Part of me feels sorry for him, because I know Stephanie manipulated him, but another part is angry because he chose to believe her. For all those years, instead of defending me, his own daughter, the house is now mine. Completely mine. I painted the walls colors I like, converted Ryan's room into an office to do my college homework. Kayla's room is now a nice and quiet guest room. The master bedroom is still technically my dad's. I haven't touched anything there because, I don't know. I guess part of me hopes that someday he'll come back alone. Without Stephanie. I rented one of the rooms to Melissa, who was my mom's best friend and was always good to me. She pays reasonable rent, helps with household chores without me having to ask, and it's like having family again, but the good kind. The house is quiet now, there's no one yelling at me to do this or that, no constant drama, no Kayla taking pictures with flash at 3 inches the morning in the bathroom we shared. I can leave my things in the living room without them disappearing. I can cook whatever I want whenever I want. I can exist in my own space without feeling like I'm bothering someone or that I don't belong. It's weird, but good. I still work at Starbucks, but now I'm really saving because I don't have to give money to anyone else. I'm a year away from finishing my business administration degree, and I'm thinking about what to do next. Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing. If I was too harsh. If I should have handled everything differently. But then I remember all those years cleaning bathrooms, washing clothes, cooking for people who didn't even thank me, living in my own house like I was an intruder, and I think no. That I did exactly what I had to do. My grandparents left me this house for a reason, so I would have security and a home, and I'm finally living in it as they intended. I don't know what's going to happen with my relationship with my dad. Maybe eventually we can work things out. Maybe not. What I do know is, I'm not going to let anyone make me feel bad for claiming what's legally and morally mine. This is my house, my space, my life. And for the first time in years, I feel like I really own all of that. Like I finally have control. Last week, my dad sent me another message. This one said, "Your stepmother and I are having problems. I've been thinking a lot. Could we talk?" I don't know what I'm going to do with that yet. Part of me wants to hear him out. He's my dad after all. But another part thinks I've had enough drama for a lifetime. For now, I'm good where I am. In my house, with Melissa making cookies in the kitchen and asking me if I want to watch a movie. In my room that smells like the candles I like and not Kayla's cheap perfumes. In my space. And that's enough for now, I guess.